but right, we wanted to say that I did that homework first to make sure that we're in grades. And so that was
So it's not just fresh.
it's more, it's like 650 gallons. It's by donations and foundations.
Hello.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Jessie Lee Jones. I am the director of the Platteville Public Library, and I'm here today as a liaison from the steering committee to this delivery work group. So we're going to start off just by introducing our presenters, and I'll actually just let them introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Julie Schmoody. I am a co-chair of the Delivery Work Group, and I'm administrative coordinator at Winnifox Library System.
Hello, I'm Corey Bauman. I'm the Delivery Services Coordinator for South Central Library System.
Hi, I'm Kate Burrington. I'm from the Wapaka Public Library. I'm the director there.
Charles Clements. I work at the Wyandotte Rivers Library System, and I do coordinate the delivery service there.
And we have Maureen.
In addition to these lovely presenters today, there are a couple of work group members. I see one in the audience. We've got Maureen Welch, who's from the Indian Head Federated Library System. And are there any other work group members here? No. So the other two not here today are Judy Kaniasti from the Milwaukee County Federated Library System and Julie Pullman from the UW System. She's from the Office of Learning and Information Technology. Again, I'm Jessie. I am the steering committee liaison, and we have a DPI liaison. Is she here? Shannon Schultz, our DPI liaison, is also here today, so thank you for coming. Before we get started, I wanted to share a little bit about this presentation and the process overall. The purpose of today's presentation is for the work group to share information about their model and for you to hear, or for us to hear your thoughts and comments. And so we really look forward to hearing from you on that. We ask that you keep your comments and questions specific to this work group. What pieces are missing from this service? What do you really like about the model that they are proposing? What do you have misgivings about? If you have more general comments or feedback, please feel free to talk to one of the steering committee members here today, or look us up at the booth in the exhibit hall later. You can also always submit a question or comment by email, and we'll be sure to provide information on how to do that at the end of this presentation. Okay, so there are some frequently asked questions that work groups and steering committee cannot yet answer. And you'll see some of those right there. We recognize that not having these answers can be frustrating for everyone, and we're feeling that. It's frustrating for the work groups too. Everyone would like to know how all of this is going to turn out. But this is a process, and we have to trust that the process is going to take time. The work groups are developing their models. Once that's done, the steering committee will start working on their report to the DPI. Okay, so the job of the steering committee is to present a final report with recommendations for improving collaborative statewide public library services to DPI. Part of the job of the steering committee is to develop recommendations about governance, administration, and funding. There are several things that will help the steering committee, including Chapter 43 research. This work group is reviewing Chapter 43 to identify sections related to the process and what might need to change based on the recommendations from the work groups. They have also been contacting other states and analyzing how statewide library services are represented in other state statutes and service structures. The principles of structure are the steering committee has adopted a set of principles devoted to the structure that they recommend. This document lays out that the steering committee will work to guarantee that governance, administration, and funding recommendations will meet critical standards. And of course, these can be found on our lovely website. And we encourage you all to go there. Funding and cost standards subcommittee work. This subcommittee is looking into how different funding is allocated to fund system services. The Human Resources Subcommittee is working to gather information about HR for the steering committee to consider as it makes recommendations. The work group report, the steering committee has adopted a recommendation for the final report, which will be coming in March of 2018. In the next slide, we'll cover more about what the recommendation report will contain. The steering committee won't be creating these recommendations alone. We will be involving stakeholder groups in discussion to help us figure out the best way to move forward. We expect the community to be active participants in creating the final recommendations for the DPI. The steering committee approved a recommendation report outline at the July retreat, which offers the work group standardized expectations. As you can see, there are a lot of steps that we are taking to make sure our models and recommendations are as strong as possible. So not all of the work groups will have the exact same report to present to the steering committee, but there are many shared features which are on the slide, and you can see the entire outline on the PLSR website. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Charles to kick off the work group presentation.
Okay, what I'm going to do is talk about kind of the way the service is now. So what we have now for regional delivery is some systems have their own system run delivery. That's the case in Winding Rivers where I'm from. Some have a contracted courier. Library system just to the north of us, Marines, has a contracted courier. And overall, the state frequency ranges from one stop 2 days a week at one end to more populated areas that have as many as 6-day delivery, some twice daily stops within. So that's about the vast range of frequency level of service. As far as the statewide delivery is concerned, it's a mixture, also a vendor and library-run services. Majority of about the bottom 2/3 of the state gets delivery directly from Madison. There'll be a slide later showing how that's set up. But Madison can't get to everybody in a single day and back, so there is some vendor, especially in the northern part of the state, some vendor service. And having another, I guess, feature of having a service from one point is we have more vulnerability to weather-related interruptions. So it might be snowing a foot in Madison and the sun might be shining in Eau Claire, but the delivery doesn't go out because they can't get out of Madison. So we're kind of looking to a way to alleviate some of those problems with our plan. That's one of the problems. The other problem with current statewide delivery is that there's a lot of overlap with local delivery. So we will go sometime to the same places within an hour of each other in the same days as the statewide delivery. UW La Crosse, for example, we go there, and so does the statewide delivery. So that's obviously duplication. It's probably not efficient, and we'd like to reduce that. Go to the next slide. So this is probably, any of you who work in systems know this map, and it's just graphically showing you, and interestingly, even divide. 8 systems provide their own delivery, and 8 have a third-party vendor. And that's how it's broken down geographically. Now let me say right away that the red counties and blue counties is not political at all. As I was driving down there, I was thinking, Corey did this map, and it's a great map, but maybe we should have chosen green and yellow. But it does show out that largely it's a north-south split, and it tends to be the more populated areas that have library, and I think it's economy of scale. It's really hard to get a library-provided delivery way up north when you drive a lot of miles and not picking up much. It's a little easier down in the Madison area or even in our area where there's more volume for the miles driven. But that's an interesting thing. And here's a map of the statewide deliveries. How this works is, like I say, from about Eau Claire, Green Bay, and south, they get runs directly from Madison. So you can see there's a southwest run, a west central one, an east central run, and a southeast one. They all go start and end in Madison, and go to some of the places that local delivery does. In the far north, because it's too far to get there from Madison, their private courier, which is Walco, picks up their stuff, takes it to Wausau, and it's then picked up there and sent the next day. But obviously those areas get 1 day slower statewide delivery because of the distances involved. So also our plan is trying to address that inequity. So inequities in the current system. Some individual libraries, as I referred to earlier, only receive 2 days of delivery, some get 6 days. Some areas struggle to provide 3-day delivery. tend to be the less populated areas with lower state aid dollars. Some areas have slower turnaround times due to poor connections to other regions. That's the far north. So our plan is to reduce these inequities by having fewer regions, and then we can equalize the dollars spent in each region a little bit more. Reducing the duplication, so we won't be able to go into the same places twice. The idea is, well, everything will be picked up regionally and sorted regionally, and then we'll transfer between those regions. Ideally overnight. Corey will talk more about that. So reducing duplication will make more resources available as well. We'd like to be sure that libraries receive delivery every weekday they're open, so no difference between if you live in the southwest or northwest part of the states as opposed to the southeast part. We'd like everybody to get equal service, and having a system of moving things between regions that's more uniform throughout the state. This is Corey's slide, and he'll talk more about it, but I think it does talk to the equity issues too. We got a system that's 2 counties, and a system that's 5 counties. You can see the discrepancies in the dollars they get, number of deliveries they get, and the number of state dollars they get, which is why there's only 3 days of delivery in the Southwest and 5 days in the North. So they've got twice the money to do it with. That's one of the inequities we'd like to deal with. I guess Corey's going to take over.
I got the clicker.
Can you hear me okay? Can I put this down? Corey,
Is that okay?
it'll pick up better.
Oh, will it? Yeah. Okay. This good? All right. That's one extra object. So what I want to talk about is where we're at and defining our regions. How did we come to define what we have in terms of a region? It's clearing the slate and what's logistically smart, regardless of what exists currently. And what we determined is that what we wanted for regions was a territory that had access within 8 to 9 hours of a working day for the delivery and the sortation. Also within approximately 100 miles of all libraries within that region. And that's approximate. That's not going to be precisely uniform, but we try to do that as much as possible. Hub locations near transportation centers that will link quickly to neighboring regional hubs. And so this is where we worked off of. 7 geographically unique to each other, like we talked about, uniform type size, including population considerations as well. As you can see, the southeast is quite a bit smaller than the northwest, simply because of population. Connecting those hubs. This is just an example. So, like a work day, as it wraps up in a given day, how does an item get from one place to another? As the work day wraps up, about 4 to 6 p.m., the hub-to-hub transfers are going to take place from one section to another. Somewhere between 6 and 10, it arrives at its destination, that next hub, where it would be offloaded and other materials picked up and returned back to the original hub. And then at each individual hub, the third bullet point there, the next service would begin locally. And before those items would go out locally, those would be sorted onto trucks so that it would make the destination the very next day. So this just kind of walks through, say, a sample of an item that's leaving, in this example, Appleton, going down to Lake Geneva in the southeast. This current day method would take a couple days, crossing over 4 existing systems. But in the SCLS world, we would pick it up and return it all the way back to Madison, then onto Lake Geneva. In this case, though, what we would envision is that it would get picked up one afternoon or late morning in Appleton, taken back to its regional delivery hub, which is going to be in the neighborhood of Appleton, perhaps Green Bay. Then it's going to be sent from there to the Lake Geneva hub, which presumably in this case, is going to happen overnight to the Milwaukee, Waukesha area. And then once it's on the truck the very next morning, it would be delivered to the library locally in Lake Geneva. The objective, as I said, is to complete that cycle all in one day. In terms of being in the hands of the delivery service, we can't control things that happen locally at a library when something gets pulled, whether it's before or after that local pickup. But once it's in delivery's hands, the objective would be to get it the next day. This is feasibility. Our current approximate costs, $4 million are spent on library system delivery services in Wisconsin. About $2.75 million of that is for the regional service within our current 16 systems, and about $1.25 million for statewide service via SCLS. $300,000 from public library systems and LSTA are included there, and about $950,000 from non-PL, that's Public Library Delivery Network members. That's counting like our colleges, the university system, is that big chunk as well. And the last bullet point is 97%, we estimate, of our volume statewide happens within those 16 systems. So that's your ILS, taking care of all your member libraries. Only 3% is crossing boundaries right now. How can delivery frequency be increased for libraries without a large increase in the total cost of delivery? Regional delivery hubs would serve all libraries in each region. That includes those specialized libraries, the universities, private colleges, any other customer that may be within one of those territories. All sorting would happen at the regional hubs. Those two changes would eliminate the need for a central delivery hub like we have now. Not having a central hub for materials to be shipped from one region's hub directly to any of the other 6 regional hubs. So it's all going to be happening on the fly. And each regional hub is going to have a portion of that responsibility to make that sortation happen. Consolidating the number of delivery service regions from 16 to 7 allows for fewer shipments between the hubs. And all of this significantly lessens the cost of transporting materials between regions for statewide delivery. How will the work group finalize the cost analysis of a new model versus what currently exists? So we're going to finalize the details of pricing of new models, both in-house and the vendor-based options that we've talked about. We're going to determine the funding share of the new models for non-public library members to isolate what a cost would be to our existing public library delivery. These two cost components will allow the work group to perform comparative analysis of what exists now. I think we're moving on. I want to save
You want to save the cool thing for me?
the animation.
Thanks. Okay, so I am really representing to you the end user, the library, and I'm really glad that we have logistics and people who deal with delivery now on our group, so we're in good hands. So now we're going to talk a little bit about delivery standards and service. And what we're going to be talking about is, of course, the other things we've alluded to, which is creating an equitable service for everyone. We've been throwing around names. What would we call this thing? Would it be Library Prime? Would it be Priority Library? We came up with Library X. Hopefully you understand all of those references. So what we're looking at then is access to 5-day delivery for all the libraries, unless they don't need it. If they're only open 3 days a week, there's no need to deliver in it. In fact, it could cause problems for that library if nobody's there to receive that delivery. So all items picked up in regions on a day would be sorted that day and then sent on to a state collection or a delivery connection. And then next day delivery between 2 libraries in the same region. You know, we have a lot of systems that are next door to each other, but if they're trying to get something from one library to another, it has to be sent down to Madison and then come back. So, you know, if I'm ordering something from Wausau, it's going to go all the way downstate until it finally gets back up to Wapaka. So making that more efficient. Also, the fact that we're going to be handling all the volume will be an efficiency. Ideally, overnight connection between statewide regional hubs. I mean, we pay a little bit more for Prime, and that's one of the things that we're going to have to determine if we really want to have that happen. Okay, so then we're going to talk about standards. With simplified, efficient labeling, we're going to be able to easily sort and then deliver those things that are needed. So we really need to have that standard, and we're going to make that really clear that everybody can't have, you know, little slips of paper all over the place. That's probably not going to work on this volume. And then consistent delivery times at the libraries. It's a lot easier to plan for your staff if you know you've got that truck coming at 12 noon, rather than, well, it might come at 8 in the morning, but you could see us by 3. That's really not going to work with the system. So then standardize internal delivery supplies and equipment to best meet the needs and increase our purchasing power. So if everything's the same, it's all standardized, one place where you're going to be ordering those supplies, and then also if we're using a vendor, we have a lot more oomph because we have a bigger volume. And then reasonable damage protection and resolution. So just for those libraries that are concerned about having their stuff being moved all over the place, they know that it's going to be safe. And then we're going to talk about services. So with this model in mind, the fact that we have a regional, everything's standardized, we can think about moving things around that maybe we don't currently move around. So we might be able to think about computers being moved from one point to another. If we have a regional IT program, and then that can also be part of our delivery. So certain materials in support of digitization and archives. I went to Tech Day, and they talked about the fact that South Central has these great kits for creating digital pieces from those archival points in your library, and to be able to actually put that on a truck and know it's going to arrive at your library is pretty great. We also have some makerspace kits that are in our system, and we have to go pick those up because delivery isn't going to be responsible for making sure those get from point A to point B. So that means more driving and more staff time. So we're looking at an increase in service for our library patrons and for our librarians. And then finally, usability. We want to make sure that this is a system that's easy enough to understand, that everybody has the same experience. So if you have a central contact point for all of your delivery questions, you don't have to go to 3 different areas. Right now we go to our system, we say this is a problem with our system, they go to the deliveries, and so it goes on. But if you have one point of contact, that's just going to make it easier for librarians. And just the fact that we're going to have a bonded service, we know that those materials and drivers will be safe. That's important to us as well. And then reasonable damage protection. We're talking about items that are purchased through funds locally, and we need to make sure that those two are protected. We put a lot of materials in delivery, and we want to make sure that they arrive at the other point in the safe condition. So all of those things are covered.
So what do we have to do yet? We've heard a lot of information thrown at you. One of the next steps for this group is to work on the cost analysis, and you heard some of Corey's information. What we will do is refine those numbers and how they relate to hub connections and our delivery options. So that's number one, the cost analysis, and also develop the service recommendation, the framework that we will go ahead with regarding to costs. Governance and administration. This is looking for foresight in what we have to do yet, is we want to make sure we develop a governance recommendations, and that would be to make sure that there's an oversight of what's going on, so that we're not doing this and finding ourselves 40 years down the road with not having to or having to redo this entire thing. So we want to take a look at administration, and I'm not going in order, I'm sorry. We want to look at administration. There's obviously going to have to be some type of central administration. We're wanting to have an oversight committee to assess changes in volume and logistics, and keep our finger on the pulse of what's going on in delivery services. We want to develop consistent data gathering. Every system right now is using a different way to quantify what their service includes, and we want to make sure that we have consistent data gathering to give us the best possible information to move forward with, and also an advisory group that would be put together to work on the oversight of the delivery services. The next thing we're going to have is implementation. And what we want to do is, are there any parts of implementation that could be moved forward with at this point with current services that are available? Can we move ahead further, or do we need to phase in? Do we need to base our information off of the ILS program and how that's an overlay is going to affect? There may be some parts of this that we can move ahead with at an earlier pace and or at an earlier time frame. So this is, again, what we're going to be looking at. And then finally, we need to refine our recommendations. And what we need to do is, how are we going to evaluate our plan before we present it to the steering committee? And for that, we will use our review panel, which we have a number of people selected that will review the plans, see what we're missing, anything that looks strange to them. And also, we do want to do another survey of the library community to make sure that we have hit all of their decision points, that if they have any comments or concerns or anything else, that we're addressing those also. So, I talk fast.
Okay, so there are a multitude of ways to follow along and offer feedback on not only the delivery work group, but on anything PLSR related. And we strongly encourage you to do so. So our website is awesome. I think the project managers at Wills are doing a great job of keeping that up to date. Sign up for the blog so you get updates about any happenings that you may be interested in knowing about. There's the contact form for general feedback, and then you can also use that for specific work groups or the steering committee. There is a calendar of events with dates for upcoming steering committee meetings and work group meetings. I really like that one myself. Agendas, notes, and recordings are always posted for these meetings, so don't hesitate to go back and review anything that you're curious about how we got to where we did. Agendas and notes, I already said that. And then finally, there are email addresses available for both the project managers, and if he clicks one more time, you'll see the email for steering committee members as well. And finally, we'll open it up for questions.
In Star Trek terminology, is the prime directive to improve delivery or to reduce cost?
Did everybody hear that question? He said, is the prime objective to reduce cost or improve delivery services overall?
Where you went toward both?
Both, yes.
I think if we reduce some of these inefficiencies, we will be more efficient with the money. But the goal is really not to save money; it's to improve service, in my mind, anyway.
And create that equitable service across the state. I saw a question back here. Yes.
I'm Vicki Taylor-Lay from South Central, and I oversee both the technology and ILS services for South Central. And when I looked at this map before, 3 of our northern counties are in a different region. And I have 2 beliefs. One is that technology and ILS services need to stay together within a region. They're integral to each other. So my question is, do you see an issue with potentially having 3 counties in a different delivery region, but in a different ILS, maybe technology region? The decision at the local library level, it's a local choice or local control as to whether they agree to participate in the system's shared ILS. So that could be kind of a sticky issue if for some reason it was decided that no, they can't. I personally think it can be worked out, but I'd like to hear what you guys have to say. Oh, you want?
I was going to say, ask that question of the ILS people.
Oh, thanks. Just pass it on.
Answer from this group, because the books that those counties get almost all their delivery from the Madison hub area, and now everything will have to come from the Madison hub area to a different hub area down to them. And in that hub area, they might represent 50% of the traffic, and will all have to come hub to them. And because South Central does a lot more interlibrary loan than some of the other systems, we might end up being a big part of the price cost of that hub. We don't want to pay more for basically the same service. If we go back to the prime directive, one of the prime directives is everyone should get quality service, but no one's service should be degraded to get equality of service. And so that's one of those counties. We want at least equally good service. And I know Corey's working very hard to get that.
Yeah, you have Corey on your team, that's for sure. And I think that that is a fear that people have, is that it's good right now. Why do we want to change it? But then we have to remember that it's not good for everyone. And so instead of thinking of equalizing that to bring it down, why can't we equalize it to bring it up? And that's what we're hoping for.
And one thing I'd like to point out here is that this group has been tasked with finding the most efficient and equitable service specifically for delivery. And what I think we'll see happen is, once they've made their final recommendation, it's on the steering committee to kind of see how all of those pieces play together, and then we'll come back to make adjustments as needed.
We did actually talk about that. And from a purely delivery perspective, it wouldn't matter if the ILS regions and the delivery regions didn't match. If you have next day delivery anyway, it isn't going to matter, except if you get so much volume moving around in the delivery that you can't handle it anymore. So in my region, I don't think it would matter if we added a couple of counties that weren't in our ILS, because the volume we could handle. In some places in the southeast that might be, or in the Madison area, it might not be possible. So that's something we haven't resolved yet, but we have discussed it.
I have a question as far as the red and blue diagram with those systems or those counties that are operated through system-run delivery systems, and then those who use contract out the system. What will be I'm really not sure what my question is as far as what will be the process? Like at Monarch, we own 3 trucks. I know South Central owns quite a few trucks. I don't know how many Winding Rivers owns. But what will be the process in making that decision if we go with a vendor or if we continue with our self-run systems? What will be that process? Or how will you make that decision?
I'll try and answer. I think your question is a bit out in front of where we are on that. We want to go through these paces to examine the cost of what internal looks like what you would have, like we have in South Central, and compare that against existing private courier options. This red and blue, we recognize we can't have a dedicated service like we have in the southern region across the northern parts, just because of the cost and the scale of what's being asked. What happens in between, I think, is really the big question, and that's a real difficult thing to analyze at this point. How would you go from a dedicated service like you have now, and perhaps those within your region decide how you come to choose what's best? Do you collaborate now with a greater group and recognize that continuing a dedicated service is in your best interest? Or if there's a cost issue, I think that's going to happen somewhere down the line. That would probably happen internally within a region. I don't know if I answered that.
When you talk about overnight delivery, next day delivery, you're talking about between regions, correct?
That's correct.
And that's the 3%?
That is the 3%
That's the 3%.
number. Yeah, and includes some other partners, the university, of course.
Okay. How did you determine that the need was for next day as opposed to 2-day or 3-day?
I think what we wanted to do was examine the equity issue as much as anything, but then also examine like what is an ideal situation, what is the best case, what would we like if we can afford it. So I don't think it was anything like we're aiming, shooting for the moon on something, but is it possible to do this and still maintain quality, still maintain the cost that we have currently?
When you are looking at costs, I think it would be interesting to look at a 2-day, because if we're thinking about the stakeholders here, if we're talking about the library customers, I worked reference for 30 years, and I frankly never ran into somebody who thought that it was unreasonable that to get a book from Ashland or someplace else was going to take 2 or 3 days, so I would just suggest that looking at that cost too, especially if costs are coming in higher, might be something that we in the library community could stomach. I don't know how many of us have right now, across the distance that you're talking about for regions, that we have that overnight. I don't think that's very common. So if we're looking at equity, maybe equity could be set at a different point without causing that loss of service that we were talking about that we don't want to have in any system. Just my suggestion.
We did discuss.
Along that same line, I always wonder, I've never seen people sitting around the library waiting for the delivery van to come to get their book. And, you get a call.
They're there.
But then also the books that people don't pick up. They sit there for 4, 5, 6 days, and then you got to send them back to the requesting library, the ownership library. And in many systems, you have to pay for that. But you borrow the book from them, even though you're not checking out to anybody.
From a delivery perspective, though, that doesn't matter because the cost is the same for books that are unpicked up. Purely delivery, I know.
I guess what I'm getting after is why are we in such a hurry to get the books there when nobody's going to pick them up? I don't know, maybe that's a small number, but I don't know.
My understanding of this process is that we're supposed to come up with an ideal plan, and then practicality is always going to enter in. We have discussed it might be more practical to have a northern collection point and a southern collection point, and then a connection between them, which means second-day delivery. Still a lot better than we do now. But yeah, we're aware of the practical problems. we have discussed it.
Yeah, overnight is probably going to be more costly, so, you know, if you just say it's not going to go overnight, then you've got your 2-day instead. But we did debate this a lot, and we decided that we're a convenience-driven society. People want it now. They can order online and get it the next day, and we want to be a part of that, that libraries need to be at their best. And certainly cost has to come into that, and it will eventually. But our model, we hope, is to provide the best possible service.
I have a question. Not with any intention to marginalize what you've already done. I know you're working hard on this process and you have a lot of work in front of you. But what we're talking about is something that there are a lot of folks do already, and they do it pretty well. And I mean logistics professionals, and I mean folks like FedEx, UPS. So my question for you is, do you have any intention at any point to use for review or consulting any of these types of firms to look at what you're doing or what the recommendations are, look at that template, whatever it might be, and to review it and offer their opinions? I'm just curious about that because I've seen the results of that in our industry and others, and they've been pretty remarkable sometimes. And again, I know you're working hard on it. I'm not suggesting in any way that you're not prepared to do what you're doing. But again, I always like to get maybe an opinion such as that to guide me.
Okay, I can speak with that a little bit. We had gone out for a request for information. We did hear back from a private vendor who gave well, actually, we heard back from 2 private vendors that gave us a lot of information. We will have a review panel. The review panel will have people formerly in the library place, in the library world. We also have somebody whose husband owns a trucking company, or did. I don't know if it's, or we have potentials. We were also looking at perhaps having a logistics from the university class, perhaps taking this and looking at it to see what they can see. We have contact with. I have a contact with Schneider, that they might be, Schneider Trucking, that they might be able to come in and help with that. So yeah, we're looking at that as far as the review process too. I think we have a lot of experience here in delivery, and we do have a logistics professional here. But yeah, we do want other eyes to look at it and see how we're doing. We had a list of company contacts that were probably 10, I would think, that we can approach, and actually from that we only got one that was willing to put a dollar amount on it. The other one wanted to change everything that we had been working on. So,
If I could just say, I think one of the things, you gave us a lot of good information, and as you said, you're creating the best prototype that you could. Without having any cost analysis today, that sounds great, but until we can see those numbers, when Ralph alluded to FedEx, do you want to think about what it would cost you to send a book FedEx to get there the next day? Totally not doable as far as monetarily.
actually, we were talking about that right before we met today, and it's interesting. You talk about FedEx or overnight delivery from FedEx, UPS, something else. The cost of delivery of a library material. First of all, we were talking, there's 18 million books that go in transit, 18 million in the state. And what Bruce pointed out is that's 3 per person within the state, 3 library items that are going into this delivery. That's quite interesting. And the other part of it is that the cost of delivery of a book currently within our delivery system is 23 cents. So it's really, it's economical right now. So now what we want to do is make it better. And if we can make it cheaper, that's great too, but we want to make it better.
Even if you can reach your goal.
Right.
And at the same cost. It would be amazing.
Right.
That's the goal.
So I'm just curious to know, at the local hub level then, will there be some sort of centralized standards for local processes at the local hubs to where they would all automate or not? They would all whatever or not? So I'm wondering about sort of local control versus state control, purely out of curiosity, not from
Yeah, I think one of the things we talked about is that there have to be standards for labeling. If you can't read the language, it's not going to mean anything to you. So definitely standards would have to be. As far as automation, I don't think it's absolutely necessary.
Automation of the delivery process would be difficult.
I meant sorting, sorry.
An automated sorting would require either RFID or some kind of barcode consistency or something like that. So we talked a little about that, but it's not really part of our plan. I think as far as the local control as opposed to statewide, I think what we're looking at is uniform size of containers so we can do statistical analysis, uniform labeling, and then the standards that things have to be picked up and delivered and sorted in time so they can be transferred between hubs. A lot of this will still be local, how you set up your runs, things like that. And I think even if you want to have a vendor or run your own service, it could still be local. I don't think anything in our plan can either be all vendor, all library, or a mixture like it is now. I don't think anything in the plan requires it to be one or the other.
Cindy, I just wanted to add one thing about the automation internally. I know it's been examined in the past. There are places that do that type of thing currently. One of the big issues with that is the initial capital investment. It's something that's the ongoing maintenance. And I'm going to be paraphrasing Bruce a little bit and looking at some of the things that we do on high volume already. Was able to handle large slugs of volume faster than what a mechanical system would do. You throw people at a certain task and they were able to match those outputs that automation had without some of the drawbacks.
I want to thank you for your work and also your dedication to the purpose and the fact that thanks showing off the really cool shirts that you got.
Julie did those shirts.
Yeah.
She gets credit for that.
Thank you.
And with that, I'm sorry to say we are out of time for this session. Thank you all for coming.